Our next speaker is Cornell du Houx. Alex has been a collaborator with the forum since our second year. He's actually the gentleman who's been interviewing our speakers upstairs. He has a group called Code Blue, Water Security, Conflicts and Solutions, where he does video-based campaigns. He has received the Campaigns and Elections Magazine Annual Award for the Best Campaign for his work in launching Operation Free, which was a coalition of veterans combating climate change with the Truman Project. He served in the Marine Corps for 7 years. He was deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. He is currently a public affairs officer with the Navy Reserve, where he is deployed to Afghanistan and Bahrain. He was elected to the Maine House of Representatives in 2008 and has most recently founded an incredibly important group called Elected Officials to Protect America, which he's going to share with us today. Please join me in welcoming Alex to the stage.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Amy, for an incredible introduction, but also really an inspiring forum. So I was straight out of the Marine Corps pretty much in high school. And really, I grew up in rural Maine. I was like, okay, I'm going to see the world. I'm going to see the Marines. I didn't even really know the different jobs in the Marine Corps, so they gave me demolitions and rockets. And so promptly deployed me out to Fallujah, where it was one of those kind of blistering hot days where just touching the rifle without your glove felt like you're reaching into a grill and putting your hand on it. And then a roadside bomb hit my Humvee. Fortunately, the person who did it wasn't very good at his job, and we were able to catch him as the dust was clearing. And there's supposed to be a clicker here, but you'll see the visuals come up. If they can just fast forward the slides, that would be wonderful. But what would happen is we caught him, we put him in the Humvee, and then cordoned the area, and we started to realize upon the investigation what was happening. He had been paid by Al-Qaeda to plant the IED because his crops had failed due to a massive drought due to climate change. And this really changed my perspective. I went in there, I'm going to accomplish the mission with the Marine Corps, and that's what the entire job was. But what happened was I started to think about how this was globally connected. Actions that happened half a world away influenced his actions to make him more vulnerable to commit this. Now he's still accountable for what happened, but at the same time, the world's activities and climate change was causing people half a world away who had nothing to commit violent acts. And so I got back to the Maine and I decided, okay, I'm going to run for the state legislature and get elected, and I served on the Energy, Utilities, and Technology Committee and got really engaged in this work. Of course, the Secretary of State was also a Navy commander, now Navy captain in the reserves, and the Adjutant General was like, hey, Alex, you really need to get a commission. And said, no, I don't have enough time. I can't leave for a year with my constituents. And so they promptly made a cardboard cutout of me and put it in the House Speaker's rostrum and said, if you don't take a commission, we are going to commission Flat Alex. So I was like, okay, sir, you got me. And I promptly took, the recruiter was there the next morning. And I got the commission, and they promptly sent me back out to the Middle East, this time in Bahrain. And Bahrain's an interesting place. It means two oceans. One is the ocean around it because it's an island between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and the other one is the aquifer underneath it. And it was the first place in the Middle East to strike oil. But unfortunately, there's no place in the world that I have seen that looks more like Mad Max. The oil lines, the pipes, the skull and crossbones, and the gas lines piping up, it's really disheartening to see and sad because this was once very lush in many areas. The culture advisor was telling me she grew up and she'd swim in some of the ponds there. But unfortunately, today, all her kids can do is kind of get muddy in them. And this is because the entire Middle East is drying up in a 900-year drought that's been the worst in the last 10 years. And in addition, what's happened, they punctured the aquifer, and the entire place is relying on other forms of water. And fast forward to last year, I was deployed out to Afghanistan and the Battle of Farah. The Taliban actually tweeted out, hey, we are taking this city for its water. And so we went in and had to do a community meeting to assure the community there that, hey, we're there to protect you and the water. So how does this relate to the United States, right? There's all these things happening across the US. I mean, the Tigris and the Euphrates are at 60% their water level. And you have the Center for Naval Analysis putting out a report that says 70 to 80% of the rural conflicts in the world are because of water security issues. The UN put a report out that said 37 acute conflicts in the last 50 years had to do with water. But it's also coming back to the US. Saudi Arabia is buying up water rights in the Southwest, particularly in Arizona and California. In one place alone, they can pump 2.3 million gallons out a day unregulated. They'll plant alfalfa, and then that alfalfa gets shipped to Saudi Arabia, the second most water-intensive crop to feed 192,000 cows. And this is completely allowed under our current system. So, how do we address this? Well, we formed Elected Officials to Protect America, which is a coalition of veterans who are elected officials because we believe the climate crisis and water security are national security issues. And there are over 926 state elected officials across the US. We estimate there's about 12,000 local elected officials. So there's a tremendous organizing opportunity to unite veterans because we have a shared values. And veterans tend to be more bipartisan. When I was in the state legislature, I passed just as much legislation under a Republican governor and legislature as the same under an all-Democratic governor and legislature. And there were times like that, yes, the other party said straight up to me, I can't talk to you because you're not in my party. But then I go to others in the Veterans Caucus and say, hey, can you make an introduction to your colleague? And they were more than willing to do it. The other thing, that veterans have stories. The reason I shared my story at the beginning is because they have similar stories across the US and their experiences across the world. And stories create empathy, and empathy leads to action. So part of our organizing strategy is we inspire people, and particular lawmakers, through visual value-based storytelling. We then train them, value-based communications particularly, and then we organize and connect lawmakers who are veterans across the US. But we can't do it alone. The youth are an integral part of doing this together. So we're partnering with many of the youth groups because the veterans are really protecting the youth, and the youth are protecting our future. And in a more tactical sense, we'll be launching a climate emergency tour with an electric bus across the US to 32 different cities, 16 states, to promote a climate emergency plan and legislation and policy that prevents foreign entities from buying up our water rights across the US. Because Saudi Arabia is not the only one, and China and UAE are also looking into that and acting on it. So the other part is we need to create a plan that's in place for the next administration. So at each stop, we'll have a dinner, we'll show a short video, we'll do a communications training, and the next morning conduct a press conference across the US. So this is just the beginning of what we're working on and partnering with the CNA and the other organizations to be able to make this a global effort and also a really local one. Because a lot of these stops, there's a lot of local policy that really can be highlighted and amazing local solutions out there that is here already. And these local solutions brought up to the national level and scaled can absolutely combat climate change. Because ultimately, the mission with a lot of veterans was to protect the United States and create a more secure and safe world. And that's absolutely what our mission is to do with elected officials to protect America. So, all right. So I have a minute and a half for questions. Yes.
I was in a presentation one time where the mayor of Seattle addressed a group of pollution prevention and sustainable technology advocates. And he got up and he was very clear about one thing, and this was 10 years ago or so. He said, at this point in our history, the cities must lead. He said there simply is not enough reality except at the city level. Everything else is a dispersed perception of what is going on with many conflicting theories. And of course, Seattle had already joined the international group of cities for local environmental initiatives, of which there are 1,300 doing quite well, I might say, and in which there is a tremendous amount of data of how to at least run a city sustainably. I wondered just what kind of connection you're going to have with this group, since they are the people who have pioneered training local city officials.
Absolutely. So my co-founder was a local elected official. He was the mayor. I was elected at the state level. So really, he works really strongly with the local level, and I work really strongly with the state level, and we both combine to make the most effective organizing strategy. So the cities, the mayors, and sometimes even the rural areas, and particularly some rural areas have a tremendous opportunity, particularly in the agriculture area, to make a huge impact on climate change. And the cities is where the population, a lot of the technology is. So that combination between the city, rural, and state is one that we are aiming to unify to make action on climate change. So, and I think, that is the end. So I'll be around. Feel free to ask questions, and I look forward to talking with you more. Thank you.